All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to CONSERVATISH episode 140. My name is Peter Feliciano, and wherever you're listening, make sure you subscribe, make sure you leave a review, make sure you comment, and if you're on YouTube, make sure you hit the bell, because otherwise you won't necessarily, subscribing is one thing, but hitting the bell is a whole nother, I don't know what the fuck the goddamn algorithm is, but make sure you leave a review and rate it, and you can find me on Instagram at Peter_Feliciano. You can also find me on TikTok, because I'm a millennial, at Peter_Feliciano, and follow me and all that crap. And our guest today is, I'm so excited to have you. Daddy Ray Tilton is here in the flesh with that beard. It's amazing, and thank you so much for coming on.
Sure, and hi to everybody out there that doesn't know who the fuck I am.
Nobody doesn't know who you are. And if they need any guests, go ahead and show your shirt there.
Can you see it or not?
Yeah, it says "You can pee next to me." An amazing T-shirt.
You know, it's like, who cares?
Right. Especially in the thick of. I wonder, what is that shirt connected to? Is it connected to the trans bathroom situation? Is it connected to Dory Alley?
You know, for me personally, it kind of represents everything, even from childhood. I mean, so for me, the whole bathroom and peeing has been an issue since I was a pee-shy little grade schooler. So, you know, yeah. So when this shirt came out, I just thought how perfect it incorporates my pee-shyness, getting over being pee-shy, you know, part of a kink. To goddamn, who gives a fuck where you piss? If you got to piss, you got to piss. You know, kind of mentality. So it's a full circle moment.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I like vulgar shit. I really do. I mean, otherwise, you know that.
Hello, who are you talking to?
Yeah, I mean, for those of you who don't know, I was actually talking about the episode a couple of times, or in fact, I think last year was talking about having you on. You are a survivor of HIV. You are a legend in the community, in the events community in San Francisco, and in the gay community, actually multiple places around the country. You know, and today, or this month actually, or was it April, you reached 30 years being involved in event planning.
Yes, well, I used 30 years ago when I won my leather title as at least a benchmark. You know, my activism and stuff started actually in around 82. So, you know, I've got getting close to 40 years under my belt now.
Beautiful. And what was your first experience getting into the activism angle of things?
Well, that obviously started in Kansas when I started getting sick and nobody knew what the fuck you had. And then by the time they were able to diagnose, you know, I was very ill, of course, and dying at the time. And there was absolutely nothing. There was no, you know, the Midwest was a good 3 years behind the coasts. You know, I remember being wheeled into the emergency room and it dawning on me, oh shit, I think I might have AIDS. And the doctor looking down at me and saying, what's AIDS? You know, so when I came out of that, even though they said I didn't have long to live, when I came out of that, I only had one choice, and that was to rail against it, both for myself and for the people that, you know, within 6 months of me being diagnosed, all of a sudden the Midwest was experiencing on a much smaller scale, but with the same veracity. You know, people were getting sick and dying like within a week. And so the natural instinct was you go and you begin forming AIDS organizations and AIDS support groups, and you go and you help educate the healthcare providers and the social workers and the social rehabilitation services. I mean, I did it all, which in Kansas in the early 1980s, that was some tough shit.
Right.
That was some real tough shit.
Do you feel like it was part of your constitution? Was it a mix of your constitution and the love surrounding you? Was it your inspiration and gratitude to be alive? Was it feeling, a debt to those you had lost? What helped you push through all that?
Well, in the beginning, I think it was a lot of, strong constitution. Maybe still stupidity through a combination of denial, because, sometimes I have found that sometimes fight the foe no matter what form it takes, and fight it from whatever, perspective you can, be it fear, anger, self-serving, altruistic, whatever the basis is, get out there and fight the motherfucker. And at 19 years of age, when you're told you don't have much time to live, you either enjoy the meal or you prepare for future meals. And I chose to do both. It was, it was a matter of just basic need and the way I was raised. I was just raised that, you find something needs to be done, you go out there, you do it, you take care of it, and then, you get on with your life. Unfortunately for me, it wasn't getting on with my life. It was my life, and it's been my entire life.
Right. Now, did your experience in the military help inform that motivation?
Oh, no, God, no. Military. Fuck no, I was 17. I was going in the military because my mom, basically rejected me and, didn't want to have anything to do with me as a young, coming out gay, young man. And my dad was military, and I do come from a very long, hundreds of years of history of family military service. So it didn't take much for me to join. And the uniforms are cute.
Right. And so you jumped in there. Did you find that, because obviously this was before Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Did you ask and not tell?
It was interesting. My stint in the military was a little bit brief due to a physical injury. But I will never forget the night we all, you go to this place where you get inducted and you go through your physical the next morning, and then you get on the fucking bus and, you're shipped. And so I'm 17 years old, and the night before you have a roommate, because they put you up in the hotel where you're going to get inducted. And lo and behold, that night, of course, my roommate. And so I never will forget the next morning, standing in line and going through the whole physical exam and everything. I was like, oh my God, they're going to know. Somehow they're going to know. I don't know. They're going to tell that I had, gay sex the night before.
Right. You got to make sure you wipe off your chin still. That's what.
No, it was a different version of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Let's just put it that way. But see, that was also, that was almost 40 years ago that I joined the military. So, see, there wasn't anything like, if you were gay, you were kicked out, and there was no, whatsoever. And so a lot of gays joined the Air Force because the Air Force was, if there was a lenient branch at the time, that was probably it.
Okay. And I also had a friend who was from the Midwest. I think it was Iowa? No, Missouri. But not the more southern part of Missouri, but the more northern. And he talked about how there was a large swath of experiences he had as a kid where the guys he would hook up with would be, everybody was straight. It wasn't like coming out wasn't a thing, but then every once in a while, somebody, you and him would roll in the hay, and it would be the most straight guy. It would be the most, was that similar to your experience growing up in Kansas?
Yeah.
Okay. Was there go ahead.
There was a lot of experimenting going on, in the farming communities. And, I was definitely, nobody knew what it was. We didn't name it or anything. Well, we were just doing what came naturally, to be perfectly honest. Right. And then, I came away from that and, was straight and, dated girls and all of that stuff before I finally, came back to my natural roots. Which apparently a lot of people are doing today. But anyway,
Me too.
Yeah, it was not. I was not one of those where, I don't know, it was a very, very small community. So you got to remember, we're like 100 people or so.
Right. And those people that you had bad experiences with, or that saw you whenever you did come out, like as an example, your family, did you also see that they had positive, like, was there positive examples in your life? Or I guess the question I'm asking is, from my experience, like, I think people are complicated, and even though it seems like your constitution partially was to have that strong military backbone running through your family, and to learn from a young age that when something needs to get done, you get it done. And so there were positive things that you gleaned from your childhood and from your community, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it gave me the basis, and the fortitude, and the moral compass, not in the way most people think of a moral compass, but for me, it gave me a standard of which to view and treat people. And, in the gay world, especially in the BDSM and the leather scene, I mean, it can be a very not user-friendly kind of, group of people, as I'm sure you witnessed.
Yeah.
From different times. And so, from that little kid who was raised, in the country to, a teenager who was forced to move to California and go to high school, and then had the luxury of going back to Kansas and being reminded as an adult about the good things in life, it definitely prepared me for, the life that was ahead of me, without question.
Did your
family? People are complicated. Fuck that shit. People make their own lives complicated. You don't fucking care about that.
I just mean there's good and bad in each people, in all people that I've met.
No, but I mean, I hear when somebody says, "Oh, I'm very complicated," I'm like, "Yeah, so is the shit I just took." So
Yeah, that's very true. Anytime someone says they're deep or they're classy, run. So, and did your family ever like when you were diagnosed, was that did your family ever warm up to you?
When I was in the hospital in 1985, and again I was living in Kansas, and that was when finally we had the blood bank tests, that they actually ran back then to at least diagnose your HTLV3, that it was called back then. And so I was in the hospital and they ran that test and it came back. And then, of course, but I was also very, very ill. So, I mean, everybody, myself included, thought I was probably dying at that time. And so I'd been estranged from my mother off and on since I left home, for the military and before that. And so I called her from the hospital because I felt she should know at that point, especially if I was dying, I wanted her to know. And if it had just been her, I think that she would have come as fast as she could have. But she was married to a man, who, we all know that story. It's, a man who's whatever. And so he basically told her that there was no way that they could ever have anything to do with me because they didn't want to catch it. He certainly didn't want to catch it and give it to his kids, which, was harsh.
Right.
You're laying in a hospital bed in the middle of the country. At that time I was, what was I? Not quite. I was 21. I wasn't quite 22 yet. And so, it was a pretty big blow because, at that age, when you're dealing with something like that, all you really want is your mom.
Right. Right.
So that was a turning point for me in that regard. We never really came together, sadly, after that. And she passed away in 1993. So she's been gone for, almost 30 years. So that was sort of one of those situations where, again, I think you either crumble or you find the good. And, the good that was in it was, I remembered a mom that I was raised by who was a great mom. And I knew that, we loved each other and she did the best she could with what she had. And, it forced me to move on and let go of all of that, because I think A lot of people also make the mistake of carrying their childhood with them throughout their adult life. And, you don't have to. You can actually make a choice. It's just figuring out and realizing that you can make a choice. So I look back and I love her very much. I treasure the sense of humor she gave me. She was a crazy, wonderful, wild Cherokee Indian woman who she beat the hell out of you. And let me tell you, I was a child who deserved it every time I got it. I was a hell raiser, and I deserved every ass beating I ever got. I never felt abused. I only felt loved and protected. And that's something I also like to feel I pass on in my adult life to other people. Absolutely. Right. I think all of us want to feel loved and protected.
Right. Where in your travels through, your sexuality did you start realizing that you could incorporate your own family into? Because it's pretty perfect that you were able to. There's a lot of different facets to sexuality, a lot of different facets to the gay community, to the BDSM community, but the BDSM community specifically has different facets that are, as an example, your nickname, Daddy Ray Tilton, or, baby or puppy or this or that complement a family structure and a family feeling and a closeness that transcends sex. And where in your travels through your sexuality did you start realizing, oh, this is a thing. This is a thing this is a home for me.
When I was living in Kansas and after I was so sick, this will be sort of a long story long, but I will land the plane, I promise. When I got out of the hospital, I decided to go public right away. I didn't want to wait because I felt the panic and the urgency. I knew if that were me, I knew soon it was going to be some of my friends and, those guys that I traveled with to Kansas City, and we went and hoarded up at the bathhouses and the bookstores. I knew, I could just see like these numbers on them. And so I did I believe it was a 3-night series on, at the time, it might have been a CBS affiliates there in Topeka, Kansas. I did a 3-night, 2-hour thing, 3 nights in a row. Imagine, you haven't been this hard of a fucking time getting me to sit down for an hour. At one time, this reporter had me for 6 hours. And wow. So when that aired, the backlash was huge. The gay bar wouldn't serve me anything in a glass. It was either a canned beer or plastic if it was a cocktail or something. The doctors, of course, back then told you to do, very strange things. I lived with 2 dykes, thank God, because the dykes weren't afraid of you. Had to wash my dishes separately. Every time I used the bathroom, I had to wipe the entire bathroom down with bleach. All of that kind of, almost like what we're doing now, right. In a very strange way. But so I went by my own doing. I went 9 months. I wouldn't even let anybody physically touch me. And one day at the end of that time, I had been doing this group called Pro Pride, Performers Repertory Organization for Pride. Imagine me promoting entertainers and talent. So we started this little traveling musical review troupe. It just sort of sprung out of, I did the costuming, I performed myself, I did the choreography, with my ex-partner at the time. And he finally, one day we were all rehearsing, and I stepped away for a moment because, everybody was hugging and everybody was, doing their thing that they do. And of course, I wasn't doing that. And I don't know why this one particular day, it really got to me. And I had to step away from everybody. And I remember that moment standing there and thinking, God, is this the way the rest of my life is going to be? Am I always going to be an outsider within my own community? And it was almost like some of them were reading my mind or something, I'm not sure. And the next thing I knew, I was just like feeling people touching me and feeling people grabbing me and hugging me. And I sensed and I knew from that small little group of people that was my family and that was going to be my family. And if that was going to be my family, I had to let them love me and hug me. Mm-hmm. And by doing so, you know, it gave me that sense of family that I never thought I would feel again. And obviously you can tell in my voice, remembering that moment is what I remember that moment every day. And it carries me through. And I knew then, I didn't know I was going to become whatever, but I just knew,
a legend.
I knew there was something about me that was going to be a gatherer of people instead of a collector.
Okay.
And so I've just gathered the boys and gathered the humans. That's what I've done my entire life. And the Daddy Ray thing, when you mentioned that, it was funny when you mentioned the nickname and stuff. I want to make sure I clarified that, you know, a nickname like that is not really a nickname. It's a sign of respect. It means exactly what a daddy is that's somebody you can look up to, somebody that will take care of you. So I earned, so to speak. It wasn't like somebody just decided to call me Daddy Ray. It was like, I will never forget the first boy who, you know, said, "I love you, Daddy." And he stumbled on the words and he asked me if he could call me Daddy. And it was just such a natural thing. I said, "Of course you can, boy." And that was, well, I owned a slave before I had my first boy, but they were pretty close. And I was about 26 years old. So
okay.
that tells you how long I've carried that moniker.
Right.
Moniker
So
maybe is better than.
That was before the Civil War, right? Because then, you know.
Exactly. But which Civil War, young man?
Right.
So yeah. So that's sort of the family. That's where the family came from for me. Remembering what an amazing family I came from, my biological family, and especially my dad's family that represented basically everything that I do, think, and feel, and how I treat people comes from what I learned and what my dad's family was all about. I was very, very influenced by my dad's family. Now,
that same family were the same family who you lost touch with after you came out. Is that right?
No, that was my mom's family.
Okay.
No, my dad's family was totally accepting and fine. And you would think the people from the Midwest would have been. It was my mom's family from California that had the hardest time with it.
Interesting.
But my Kansas family. Huh?
Was it Orange County? Where was it?
Oh, God, no, darling. I'm from the Napa Valley.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Was there in some of that experience through there, can you look back on, obviously not, you know, vitriolic words or putting down or whatever, can you look back at some of the fear that you were treated with? How do you see it now? Do you see it with some understanding because we didn't know what this was and we didn't know how you could transmute it or transfer it? I don't know. It's a complicated question, I guess I'm asking, but maybe it's not.
I kind of get what you're saying. I think that you can claim ignorance at the true base of what ignorance is, which really is that you don't know. But I don't think claiming ignorance is ever an excuse for behavior. Right. Does that make sense? And I experienced a lot of really negative, bad, verbal and physical, every aspect that you could imagine by coming out the way I did with HIV, AIDS, and of course, you know, the gay issue on top of it. And like, again, in the Midwest, I mean, I was egged, I was taunted and harassed by the Fred Phelps and the Westboro Church back in the day. You know, I mean, they would see me and seek me out, you know, and harass me. I mean, I remember one time I don't know how word got to them that since I was such a high profile figure, quote unquote, at the time in the Midwest, remember, a very, very big fish in a very small pond. And they had a way of tracking me kind of like almost like a paparazzi sometimes. I mean, I remember some of them, I was in a grocery store and I don't know if maybe, it's funny telling you this story now. Now I'm just figuring out how it probably happened. I'm in a grocery store. One of their members probably spotted me and went back and told them. because when I came out of the grocery store, they were all in the parking lot yelling and hollering at me.
Jesus.
Yeah, you know. Looking back on it, it was, you know, I mean, it was horrible at the time, but I don't know. I think true warriors just sort of take up the mantle, you know, no matter how hard they've been hit, you know, or they lay down. And I don't know. Laying down's never been one of my things.
Right.
At the time, it was like hell. It was awful, but.
Right. And from what I've seen from you, so we got to, you know, you and I know each other through, you know, my experience performing at gay events, and you know, I got to be a part of Memorial before I left for New York. That must have been what, 2 years ago, I guess, and it was at the Eagle.
Yeah,
I think it was
John Tomlin's.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was a very God, that was just a heavy day, and I didn't know John very well. But I guess I'm bringing that up mostly to say that you're not a person who stuffs it down as far as emotions go. You know what I mean? Like, you're not a person who is like, okay, I'm facing this horribleness, I'm facing this trial, I'm facing this whatever, and I'm just gonna stuff it down and suck it up. Like, you power through. You're very strong, but you're not afraid to express what you need to express when you need to express it. And obviously that, you know, speaks to the safe community that you keep around you. But I think that that's, you know, what you were saying, it can easily in the normal, you know, world that we talk about feelings, it almost seems like it's binary, where you have to either suck it up and be tough, or just be a ball of feelings and crying. And it's like, no, you can, you know, this is a gray area here, you know?
Oh, yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. I always find it interesting. I get two responses from, you know, being the emotional person that I am, because that emotional person is not only is my heart worn on my sleeve, but it's worn in every part of, you know, who I am. So when people say, God, you're so amazing, you're not afraid, you know, blah, 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 you know, to your emotions and things. And I often think, well, I don't see what the big deal is. I'm just being who I am. It doesn't really take any courage, or it doesn't take anything for me to be that way. I just am. But I understand it comes from people like what you were just saying, that stuff everything, or feel they have to be a certain way and control certain things. And I find the more you try to control, the farther away you get from the balance that you need to have both. Like what you were saying, how I am. I'm very in control. I know exactly what I'm doing. I know exactly what I'm feeling, and I know exactly what's in my heart at all times. And do I balance it? Somehow I do. And thank you for noticing that. But I don't think it's that big of a deal. I'm just being who I am fearlessly.
Right. Right. And I think there are certain people, you know, we are, like you said, we're all doing the best we can with what we've got. And there are certain people who.
Oh, fuck that. You can do better.
I guess what I mean is, you know, obviously, you know, people have their experiences. We learn how we learn. But all I'm saying is, when I think it was probably that experience, and obviously, you know, we had hugged before and you know, shared good experiences. But like, I think it was that one that, as soon as I saw that door, that emotional door open up in you, no piece of me was weirded out. Obviously, you know, I've done a lot of work and have my own, you know, emotional, you know, whatever. I have very little filter when it comes to certain things. But immediately I was like, you know, it felt like the most natural thing in the world to embrace you. You know, it felt like the most natural thing to just be there, whether I knew John well or not, whether you know, none of that shit mattered, because what mattered is right here, taking care of the person that you're with and holding that space. You know, and it also kind of felt like there was an immense trust, you know, that was imbued in me. That was like, okay, is it a thing that you have to think about? You know what I mean? Or do you feel like once I enter into the Eagle, everybody's safe? You know what I mean? Or is it like, depends? Do you feel sometimes that you have to be more discerning?
I felt, well, you know, I don't know. How do I answer that? I don't feel I have to be discerning at all.
Right.
No. I did notice, though, you talking about that day, not to get off the subject, but I'm sure we will. I felt like that day changed something in you a little bit. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but there was, I mean, obviously I felt a much more of a connection to you that day as well, in a different, and in a different way. And I so felt you, like you said, even though you didn't know him, I felt like you were now experiencing a part and something within a community that you felt a part of before. But this time it was different. This time it was something, but yet at the same time, I think you also felt the safety and the comfort, because when you came, all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, I know these people. I care about these people. These people care about me. And when you can create that kind of an environment, and that's where people say I should pat myself on the back, is they say what you do is you create these spaces and you bring these people together that end up just like loving and caring about each other. And that's not something that just anybody has the ability to do. So that I will accept. That I will accept as a contribution. And if I look at it from that daddy sir perspective, I can accept that and see that more clearly than the person who is not so ego driven or that has a much more humble heart.
Right. It's an interesting thing. This is an interesting thing. Because your perspective on this will be interesting to know, because that is an interesting thing to think about. Because I think I'm definitely a dominant and daddy in my own sexual world.
Yes, you are.
But I also, even though that, because I think a piece of that is my performer, a piece of that is my ego, a piece of that is whatever, but it's also an immense responsibility, obviously, to hold space for the person.
I'm going to plug my phone in.
Okay, great.
And see if I can still, because don't you know, the plug for the phone is on the bottom where I'm trying to sit my phone.
Right.
So you may now. That's the best you're going to get of seeing me.
Okay, it's perfect.
At least my phone's on the charger now.
Amazing. So was where do you think, or because you don't really seem like a person to me when I think of someone with an ego, and maybe obviously we all do. I don't see it obviously as a pejorative necessarily, but do you feel like an ego plays into your role? The daddy role?
Oh, not in the daddy role, but definitely if you want to get into the more power exchange, dominant, submissive in exchanges, that definitely, there are times in that where I will let an ego fly. Right. Without question, because it takes, to be in some of the scenes and the situations and in control that I've been in that aspect of my life. If you don't have an ego, or if you don't think that you know your shit and what you're doing, then you probably don't have any business doing some of it.
Right. And a submissive needs to know that they're with somebody who knows what the hell they're doing. In order to feel that safety, for them to let all the guards down, they need to know that they're with somebody who is not gonna hurt them or is not going to drop them, emotionally.
Yeah, I think, it takes a lot to be a selfish pig bottom.
I love that sentence, by the way. That's not a sentence we get to hear every day. So what do you mean by that?
Well, I've experienced every flavor of submission, that's probably out there, at least currently. It changes and there are additions all the time, but I find that there are two types of submissives. And when I talk about submissives, I mean that hardcore submissive that does what you said, lets go and gives up the power and all of that, stuff. They can do it from an actual submissive, a true submissive desire, but an awful lot of them, it's coming from a selfish point of view. They're like, in order to get what they want as a submissive, they're going to sort of play the game. But in reality, they're probably even more selfish. But they tell themselves, oh, my gift to the dominant is that I'm being so submissive and I'm giving up control and I'm giving up power. Well, trust me, I know the difference between peanut butter and jelly.
This is one goddamn thing I know, and it gets passed around the BDSM community, or at least in the straight realm. The idea of I mean, I'm not going to be polished. I know I don't need to be polished with you, but I just feel that there's a lot of motherfuckers in the dominant who have the moniker dominant, who don't have the fucking soul of it, who don't have the fucking spirit of it, who know how to tie a fucking rope, okay, but because they read it in a book, but don't have the essence to really dominate somebody. And because of people like that, and I know they mean well, or they whatever the fuck, perfect children of the universe, whatever, but I feel like there starts to get these sayings passed around the BDSM community, and one of them I have a problem with is, well, really, it's the submissive that has all the power. It's like nobody, no true dominant is going to rape somebody, unless that's a play rape, but like a real safe dominant is not going to do something. They're going to plug in naturally to the feeling, to the essence, to the spirit of what you're doing, and know how to test boundaries, and know how to push, and know how to pull, and know how to create a scene. But I almost feel like the submissive, by saying the phrase, well, really, it's the submissive that has all the power, they're keeping an emotional foot out the door. Do you know what I mean? They're saying, okay, I really want to enjoy this, but I have not had an experience with a true ass motherfucking dom, so I'm going to keep an emotional foot out the door so that I stay not safe, but so that I stay emotionally in control.
Right. Well, I mean, it's funny you brought up that saying, because I laugh when I hear that, because the first reason I laugh is because as a, like I said, I mean, I've had slaves, and I've had boys, and I've had subs, and I've had pups, and I've had a couple of daddies. Oh. And I've had, the whole gambit. And a lot of people won't agree with me about this, but I have the power.
Yeah.
And if I'm good at what I'm doing, I make you think you are in control. Mm. And I can see that from a bottom's perspective as well. But if the bottom's able to do that, then they're playing with those dominants that you mentioned. They're not, experiencing what a true power exchange is. And to me, when I ever hear that statement that, the bottoms have all the power, from a serious standpoint, the person who has the power is everyone. It's just which side of the power are you on? And that's why the term power exchange to me exists and has great meaning, because the bottom is exchanging his power. He's giving it up. So no, he doesn't have any fucking power. Not if you're with me. You see what's up here? You see what this is? Okay.
God damn it, yes.
If I tie your ass down and I gag you and I do whatever and tie you up, I'm in control and I have the power and you don't.
Right. And I feel like the bottom is starving themselves from enjoying the fullness of the experience by doing that. It's
but I think they're also clouding the experience because they're really just nothing but egomaniacal, pushy bottoms, a lot of them. And so, I can read between that real quick.
Right.
And I don't have a problem. I'm not saying I'm judging, because everybody is what they are, and don't think I haven't taken advantage of those bottoms who think they're in control. I actually kind of enjoy it sometimes. But I definitely, if I have a preference, it's all about energy, and it's all about connection, really. And I know that even that to me is like, who cares about connection? And, my journey, I'm on my journey. Well, get the fuck off my road and go on your own journey. There are certain catchphrases that annoy the fuck out of me. So power exchange, yes. There's a certain bit of discussion beforehand, and I can get inside a boy's head, and I can figure out pretty quick what he wants or what he doesn't want or what he's looking for, what he's not looking for, and what his motivations are. And I may or may not respect any of those.
Right.
You know, depending on what kind of vibe I get. And so, yeah, boys aren't the ones in actuality that have all the power. Yes, you can operate and do shows.
Yeah. And I don't know, when I've only played with a couple of girls who are like that whole bratty, oh, I'm a brat. It's like, that's just such a turnoff for me. Like, if it's a genuine kink, obviously I'm not saying they shouldn't be allowed at the party or whatever the fuck. Like, we all have things going on. But I almost feel like, mama, just get some fucking therapy. Like, if you're not willing to emotionally, mentally let that fucking wall down with the right motherfucker, with a real ass dom, then what are you doing here? You know what I mean? Like, so you can, like, it's almost like they're subconsciously or really disingenuously testing and looking for a real dom who's going to say, shut the fuck up. You know what I mean? Like, which is not fair to me, because I'm going to say that or have that vibe and they're going to be offended and everyone's, oh my God, someone's, whatever. It's like, no, you be real about what you want. Be fucking real.
Well, and that's why I think a little bit of difference maybe in the het BDSM versus, the male dominant, BDSM scene is, and I'm not saying anything negative or sexist. I think I'm just stating a factual observation that the dance between men is a little less complicated. Let's just put it that way. It doesn't have to be, and I'm not making a blanket statement about all, female genders, but, from my own experience of being with women, and maybe complicated isn't the right word, but fuck, we're not worried about the exact, usage of the word here. It's just, okay, it's sometimes can be a little easier. Let's just put it that way, because, men will, when it comes to sex, we may not be we may not communicate well about other things, but when it comes to getting down, we're pretty good about sitting down and saying, okay. I mean, even to the point of, I've had written contracts with slaves. I mean, there are, you can go all the way or none of the way. But with my own personal experiences with women, you can get there. It's not that you can't get there. Mm-hmm. It's just the requirements and things you need to be prepared that it's going to be a whole big thing, rather than just let's go home and have a few conversations and then, get the fuck on your knees and let's, get this shit going.
Right. And at the same time, I do know that, the generalization would be that women are more, emotionally, can get more attached. But I have heard from a couple of men that, that whole stereotype is not necessarily the case. There's a couple of couples that I know, gay couples, where, and both of them I think are up in their 50s, and maybe that's the age thing because they've had their fun or whatever the hell. Not that they've had their fun, because everybody, I have a belief that I'll probably be at orgies when I'm 80. But I think that there's these two partners, these two couples. One of them is definitely running around having fun, and the other one is like, once we have sex, I have feelings, and so that does exist, Do you feel like, obviously it's, I think it's probably universal that the connections that you make can be very intimate, but it does seem that there's less ownership. Not like fun ownership, but like, don't play with my toys. There's less jealousy. But did that come naturally to you? Or is it something you have to work on regularly, where like, oh, somebody's playing with that guy, I really love that guy, and you just have to suck it up? Or what does it look like to you?
It kind of depends on who it is and what our dynamic is. As a young gay coming out, I mean, I was I thought, I was going to find that guy and we were going to settle down and, that whole, marriage type, Cinderella
Right.
syndrome. I mean, I had that as a very young gay. And so for me, it's always the individual. There have been individuals where I've felt jealousy, but that's been a very long time ago. I mean, I'm not a jealous person by nature. Now, possessive is different.
I heard about this. I think I had Big Red on a few weeks ago, and he talked about one of the things that that there's especially among the daddies and among the doms, there's I've heard about this guy. Okay, I trust him to play with my sub or play with my
absolutely. Toy. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. There's that factor, and then there's the factor that, again, it depends on to what level your power dynamic is. Is it casual? Is it collared? Is it leashed? Is it slaved? Is it boy? Is it submissive? Is it all of the above? And that's why I said, I've been involved in varying degrees on all those levels. And when it comes to complete and total ownership, those things don't even come into play anyway, because you are in control of everything. So there is no jealousy. You own and possess this individual. And so none of that, for me, none of that factors in, because I make a decision who you play with, or I make a decision what you do, and literally in every aspect of your life. So I mean, I've been down that road to the very, very, very intense degree. So when you fall in love, there's a saying, something about when a sir loves his boy, it's something. But when a boy loves his sir, it's one thing. But when a sir falls in love with his boy, it's a whole other thing. I don't know where the quote is exactly, but it's speaking to the power exchange when it reaches that level of being in love, and then things can shift.
Has there ever been times, and I'm sure you've seen it, but has there ever been times when you look back at a full power exchange, a 24/7 maybe that you had, or something close to that level, where you look back and you thought to yourself, you know what, I was being a little too jealous or possessive, and maybe, or you've seen that happen where a dominant or an owner can almost be petty or more protective of their place rather than trusting the relationship or the connection that the two of them have.
Oh, I've seen that many times, and I think it comes from two different things. One, it comes from being unfamiliar with the current relationship you're embarking on. So sometimes when it's new and the boundaries aren't completely set, to set up the trust, then I can see that. And then the other thing I personally think is it comes from your own insecurity as a dominant, because when I go there, the reason I don't get petty or jealous or worried or concerned is because I'm not worried or concerned, because I know that what I own and what I have belongs to me. So I think it comes from more of a dom's insecurities, right? Than, because when and if I choose to go down the road, there is no insecurities. But again, there's getting to know each other. Absolutely.
Totally. And also getting to know where a sub, it's not just, sometimes a sub knows where the boundary is. And I'm not saying it's back to that whole bratty thing that we were talking about earlier, but there is a time where someone can intentionally test boundaries because they want to hurt feelings, you know what I mean? Or they want to get back at you, or they want to, make you jealous or make you more possessive, or, drive the car and emotionally. And that's not okay,
Well, can you believe it or not, I've actually never experienced that.
Really?
Never.
Okay.
Never.
So you've never had to emotionally check somebody and be like, okay, hang on, pause. What is that? What are you doing right there? Why are you asking that question? Or why are you?
Oh, absolutely. I've had to do that, but it's never been, the motivation has never been directed because they wanted to outright hurt me or do something vicious. It usually came from just feelings that needed to be talked about in a situation that needed to be talked out and explained. But yeah, it's sort of weird. I've never been a victim of that particular scenario. I've seen it play out 100 times. Maybe that's why I avoid it.
Right. I've had it a couple of times in my not so much BDSM relationships, but times where when I can look back at my dalliance, I don't know if that's the right word. When I can look back at my relationships that were more non-monogamous, as an example, and have had, and it only came out later that she was specifically not, she wanted to kind of drop hints almost subtly or subconsciously. She didn't even know she was doing it, that in order to make me more jealous so that I would eventually lock down the relationship. Or I've had times where I've been guilty of being more aloof and more, almost like talking about these past relationships I've had so that I can subconsciously show her, hey, I'm wanted elsewhere. I'm emotionally setting up this, I don't want to let you in too far. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
yeah, I don't play those games. I don't know if I could.
Okay.
I don't know if I could. I'm not built that way. I don't know. I can't imagine playing that game. I can't imagine allowing somebody to play that game.
Right.
So I think some of it does come from what we allow to. It's not always just, if somebody's doing that to you, then you're letting them.
Right.
And
right.
I'm not saying it's always that easy and that cut and dry, but the bottom line is it fucking should be. It's like, lead with your heart, lead with your brain, and make the balance, and know when somebody's doing it. And if they're doing it to you, then that means you're allowing it.
Right.
And maybe that sounds hard-hearted, but I don't have a lot of sympathy in that department.
Yeah, just be grateful you're not in relationships with females. That's all. It's just layers deep. Anyway, in that same vein, you doing okay on time?
Yeah, I've got like all these plans and beach parties and barbecues.
In that same vein, how does a submissive who's in a full-on contract like the ones you've had, a slave, leave?
How do they leave? Well, currently I only have one door, and that's the front door. If it's really that bad, I'll put you out the back door, but you won't enjoy it.
And not necessarily in a bad way or with a bad context, but just, are there time limits when you draw up these contracts? Are there emotional, do they have space in the day or in the week where they can bring problems to you and say, this is something I've been thinking about, or what, I think it's time for us to end this. They have the space to do that.
Oh, absolutely. And that's, you can't negotiate every unforeseen, situation when you negotiate a contract. But in the beginning, for me, again, I talk from my perspective only. When you sit down and you decide to enter into this contract, what I do is it's a blank slate. And we both come to that contract as equals at that moment, as human beings. And then as we go through the contract, for me, I do the what I want, what I need, what I expect kind of thing. And then I allow the submissive. At that point, they're not a slave. They're just a submissive. They're doing the exact same thing. And within that contract are built-in things like, okay, X amount of time on X amount of days will be for doing what you just said, coming together and discussing needs and wants or changes or shifts, hopefully as they come. But unfortunately, and I will make this as a blanket statement, unfortunately, I shouldn't say most, a lot of people come into these situations and enter into these things from, sadly, a not so healthy perspective a lot of times. And that's where I feel my job as the sir, dom, daddy, whatever, that's my responsibility to vet that and flush that out if that's the case. Because a lot of submissives come from a very unhealthy perspective, and the toxic tops, I call them toxic tops, they look for those type of submissives.
Have you had firsthand experience of that?
Yes. Oh yes. Of both submissives coming from an unhealthy perspective and toxic tops trying to come at me, in my younger years too, when I was, exploring, being submissive and trying to be a boy and those types of things. And thankfully, for whatever reasons, I had the clarity and the intelligence to not only recognize those situations, but learn from them.
What would be, no, continue.
No, just, that's all, just to learn from them.
All right. What was, what more specifically would be a sub coming from an unhealthy standpoint? What does that mean? Like they're coming from a place of trauma?
I can give a very specific example. I had a submissive once that, as we became more involved and what have you, it became known to me that he had come from a very sexually abusive past, both from a male as a younger person and then as an adult from gay men. And the reason that came out was because there were some behaviors and things happening that made me question where, what was his motivation healthy? And so that we would sit down and we had a talk. This was not the one that became a slave or even became collared, because there was certain behavior and patterns and things that he would do, and I could tell he was trying to make me angry and pissed. And therefore, if I struck him or used an impact toy or something with him, I was doing it out of anger. And you should never, ever strike anyone out of anger. Right. And especially when you're in that kind of a dynamic, because then both people end up damaged.
Right. I mean, makeup sex or angry sex is fun, but like not when you're incorporating, play, not when you're incorporating toys, not when you're incorporating choking, I understand what you're saying.
Well, and that's, again, I think one of the, there is a very sadistic side of me that exists, that is not necessarily tangible.
And it's fun as shit. I love that shit.
There was an experience where a young man was trying to have an argument with me in a fight so that we could exactly do what you said, have this really hot makeup sex. And I could tell that he was used to that. And sadly, his way of getting that or getting what he wanted in that regard, he had learned to have this behavior happen, and then he would get this great makeup sex. So he was getting it from a toxic top if somebody's giving it to him for that reason. And he's coming from a toxic standpoint as a submissive. So we had quite an intense argument. And so he was, of course, I could just tell he was, thinking, okay, because then there was quiet time apart. And then, obviously he thought, we're going to come together and we'll have this wonderful, sexual experience. And when it came to that point, I said, yes, you're absolutely right. And I'm going to go meet him now. I said, see you later.
Boom. Right.
So I had makeup sex, but it wasn't with him. And I didn't take it out on him either.
Right. I wonder, because there's no necessarily thing, I guess, if you really loved this person deep, or rephrase that, if you wanted a future relationship, there is something in certain realms where you can suggest a therapy of some kind or some healing or lots of different things. But at a certain point, it's also not, even though it's our job as daddies to be more round, like if you're in a relationship, to be fully, to hold space for somebody, not just emotionally or sexually, but emotionally, mentally, physically, all that stuff. Take care of this, take care of that. And it is very selfless in that way, even though it is lots of ego and whatever tied into it. But at a certain point, if there's more work they need to do before she and I or he and I or whatever, before the sub and the dom can really gel that way in a healthy way long term, it's not my responsibility to be somebody's therapist, because that also blurs the lines. You know what I mean? Yeah. I don't want somebody to flash back to this thing, when their daddy yelled at them, like their actual physical biological father yelled at them, you know what I mean? Like, and trigger some shit. Like, that's too much responsibility. And it's also a confusing thing too, because there's a lot of, like, as an example, the stereotype, I'll just say for one of the things I've heard before from white females is they're like, well, you just want that, a certain type of Asian female because they're submissive. Like, no. A submissive is not somebody who doesn't have a voice. A submissive is not somebody who can't, who doesn't bring anything to the table or have their own personality, let's say, or have their own, you know what I mean? Like it's kind of bastardized and perverted, not in the fun way, out there in the non-BDSM world. That phrase, you know what I mean? That phrase is not somebody who doesn't have a personality or doesn't have a vote or doesn't have, you know what I'm saying?
See, that's my job as a master, to take all that shit away from you.
To take all that what away from you?
To take all that away from you, your personality, your voice.
I just mean in the relationship when we're at Target or whatever the fuck, not like when we're in the.
I still don't want you fucking talking. I point, you go.
Oh, I love my life. I fucking love my life.
When I was 26 years old and I was Mr. San Francisco Leather, I was very young, and that was when I had my slave. And of course, yes, in that time, it was not that common that there were a lot of 26-year-old masters who, had full-on slaves who lived in a cage next to the bed. But I did. And when I got ready to go to IML to compete at International Mr. Leather, of course, I didn't know anything about all this stuff either, right? I'm just kind of flying blind. And I'm like, well, fuck, this sounds like a lot of hard work. So, of course, I'm going to bring my slave.
Right.
And I never will forget going to IML, because IML is a little bit more of the, they play, and they've certainly returned more to the kink side of the community now than they used to. But let's face it, it's a fucking Miss America pageant. But of course,
Folsom versus Dory. Like Dory is like everybody's getting peed on and mouth fucked. Folsom is like, check out my garb. You know what I mean? Like,
and looky-loos. So I'm being practical. I'm bringing my slave because I need somebody to take care of my shit, right? And I never will forget getting to IML, and I could just feel not judgment, but like, wow, here's this 26-year-old kid that's coming to compete for IML, and he doesn't need a hand, or he don't need nobody because he brought his slave. And I can still remember just how that felt, and because to me it was just what I do, and it wasn't anything that I gave any second thought to at the time. Now, as a 26-year-old kid, did I have any business owning a slave, to the degree that I thought I knew what I was doing? Probably not. But I was doing, obviously doing
20s too. That's 20s,
I was obviously doing something right. I was obviously doing something right. For somebody to give up, and again, yes, to give up all of that kind of control and power to somebody. Like I said, you either have to do it because it's a selfish thing and you're just fulfilling your own need, but you're pretending to be, this master or this sirs, submissive and servant, when in actuality you're only serving your own needs. That's what I'm saying, where I can really tell the difference between that type of submissive and a submissive who really, truly, genuinely from his heart and his soul wants to serve and take care of his dominant. Right. And put their own feelings and their own needs aside. That's when it becomes real to me.
Right. I don't want anybody. That's when I've been talking about this a lot, actually. It was on the last episode too, but like in thinking about, maybe this might be a strange tangent, but like in thinking about, my future relationship, whatever, wife, because I do want kids eventually and all that shit. Like in thinking about somebody who's going to have to be a down ass bitch, because if I'm wanting this public life, especially with some of the off the wall shit and jokes that I make and whatever, I need somebody who's down. I don't want anybody who's going to be, not that they don't have their own life or whatever, but I'm going to need somebody who's like understands that I'm going to be on the road doing shows, understands that I'm going to make some foul jokes, that understands what they're getting into. I don't want to look behind my shoulder emotionally, whatever, just to make sure that they're okay, to make sure that they're not quietly resentful at the situation that we're getting into. You know what I mean? And so that has to be on a base level. That has to be on a down base level. It's not like they don't have their own life, but like I want somebody, and there are a lot of submissives who are, or women, whatever, who want that life as well, who want to be that Robin to Batman, who want to be I want to be I fucking Captain, I'm down, you know, who can look at me and go, this man. But like, in the I don't know about for men, but for women, there is that strange thing in the culture, that pressure to be like, you're just going to let him treat you like that, or you're going to let him, and like where it's like, oh, am I supposed to feel bad about what we're doing? Like, am I supposed to feel bad about what I want? It's sad.
Well, and I would never pretend ever to even assume that I know anything about what women think or do or anything like in that regard, but I do see, like what you said, a common thread sometimes where it's almost like the women make it difficult for their own gender to be submissive because of like what you just said, some of the comments and judgments of like, well, you know, especially because women, that's a sign of weakness, or that's submitting to a man, and all this. And I get all of that because that has been the way it's been for many, 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 many years. But now that doesn't have to mean the same thing it meant 20 years ago. And I find women willing to do that much stronger than they are weak because they're being submissive. They're being much stronger.
Right. There was the old unhealthy version where, what's a clitoris? Like, obviously, we don't want to go to that level, but that doesn't mean throw the baby out with the bathwater. If you want to get ravaged up against a fucking wall, I'm your goddamn guy, and there's no reason for you to feel guilty about that. There's no reason for you as a submissive woman to feel like, oh, I don't know, because I'm supposed to. Fuck the I'm supposed to. What does your goddamn gut say? What does your fucking gut say? Let's come to the table real.
That to me is definitely where the dominant, no gender even involved. Sure. That's where where I do feel a dominant has a responsibility to provide that security and to provide that space so that submissive can feel that way. And again, that just goes across gender lines, period. To me, that doesn't matter what gender you are. But the clitoris, isn't that right here?
Yes. Yeah, just south of the ovary.
That's where I always found it anyway.
Right. Man, shit. Ray, we have to wrap up, but I'm really fucking enjoying this. I would like for you to come back on at some point, if you're okay with that, sometime in the next week or month or whatever you feel. But this has been fucking great, man. I have so much more to...
This was an experiment for me because, like I said, I took off my producer hat because to see what I thought about all this crap. And I'm in favor of maybe even a little more structured couple of episodes where we maybe target a couple of specific topics.
Absolutely.
And how long did we record? Mine doesn't say.
An hour and 8 minutes.
I'm not bad for a 57-year-old man. An hour and what?
An hour and 8 minutes.
Okay, so we can shut the recording off, yes. Because then I just had a couple of actually just some sort of wrap-up questions from this.
Now?
No, it's fine. I mean, first of all, I want to make sure that I make a statement that I agree to do this because I trust you. And here we've been talking about power exchange situations. This is not that, but it is a similar thing in that, I trust what you will do with this and how you choose to edit it, etc. I can't imagine. So with your experience, when you do these things, do people actually listen to a whole fucking hour?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I don't think that people are going to find this that interesting to listen to.
No. Man, I'm telling you, people are going to eat this up. They're loving it.
I will let you make the believer out of me. And if in fact that is the case, maybe we could do some shorter segments.
Sure,
because I think about right now, like even I have a hard time paying attention to even get through a fucking movie. And I know it's just because of what we're all going through. It has nothing to do with it.
Podcast. What's nice about this is people can pause it and go to their life. They can do this. They can listen to this while they're driving. They can. It doesn't require a separate emotional attachment. They can do whatever they do throughout their day, or they can literally just watch on YouTube and just watch the two of us talking. So.
Good. Well, just in case this becomes something that we do a little bit more, because I know that I handed you a lot of information about me.
Right. And that's part of the reason. I already would have had more questions anyway.
Right.
But that's part of the reason I have a lot more to get into with you, but continue.
So in case we continue this, then I will leave you with a few words of wisdom.
Bring it.
And then I wish you nothing but peace and health, and no matter what anybody else says, don't fucking get the virus.
Okay.
my words of wisdom are the following: it's better to have hope in your soul than soap in your hole.
Okay. Soap in the hole, hope in the soul. Got it. Perfect. I'm on it.
You have a wonderful rest of your long weekend. And I care deeply for you, my friend.
I love you too, man. All right. I'll talk to you soon, Ray.
All right. And thank God we got this shit figured out.
I know, right? We did so good.
All right. Stuff your feelings. We'll talk soon.
All right. I will. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Right. Bye-bye. Here, I wonder if I can continue recording while I... Are you going to hang up? All right, there we go.